Sunlight Talk. Today we'll be giving you a lively, vivacious woman from New York. She's known as Tiger Woman in New York, but the Cat Woman in Japan. How's that? Could you tell us a little bit about what kind of a person you are to your audience?
Well, spontaneously, I consider myself a kind of a natural person. You know, I do not consider nationalities or national boundaries too much, and I am a planet person. I'm an earthling.
But the fact remains, you are still a professor of what? Tell me a little bit about
yes,
your professional
I
identity.
happen to live in the most diverse city in the whole world. And people from literally every corner of the planet is there in New York City.
Right.
And City University of New York is really central to the, as the educational opportunity for immigrants and or immigrants and new immigrants and residents alike. Yes.
How does it feel, Tomomi, to be a professor of CUNY, professor teaching English to Americans, immigrants? That makes you feel proud, look.
No, my answer would be, why not?
Explain it.
Because
meaning
that in today's world, English is spoken and used by more non-native speakers of English than native speakers of English. And English has become a firmly established common language of the earth, of the world. So these days, it's even natural for a non-native speaker to teach, to communicate with anybody, native speakers or non-native speakers alike, you know, depending on the situation, I mean.
Teaching what in particular, in addition to English language, teaching what? Cultural anthropology?
Well, language is culture, but
yes.
So you have to differentiate English as the language acquisition. And cultural anthropology as a social science, an academic discipline. So it's not the same, but they blend a lot. My anthropological training and experience is extremely helpful to the teaching of international students because I understand their cultural backgrounds and their linguistic barriers and the problems because I was there myself.
Cultural anthropology is just a huge blanket notion, and it's kind of ambiguous. What is your specialty?
I did my research as a North Africanist, meaning that I did my research in France, especially in the Parisian region, about the North Africans living in France. As you know, that means Algerians, Moroccans, Tunisians. These three North African countries have been colonized by France, and they consist of largely Arab or Muslim French-speaking people. Therefore, there's some commonality, and so I have been interested in this cultural conflict, especially
what excites you most is it's not just the history, but background of the cultures you have, the country you have visited, but the conflict to borrow your word. Does that excite you? Conflict. Why conflict? Clashes of civilizations, for example. Why?
Well, this unfortunate historical fact that France colonized these countries, especially Algeria, in such a brutal way, although Morocco and Tunisia were made the protectorate rather than the département de France. So there's a different psychological difference too. You see, the Algerians were mostly traumatized people. They were brutally, invaded and colonized. And after 8 years of one of the most brutal wars, la guerre de libération, it is called the War of Liberation, they finally won the independence in 1962. But in my opinion, the semi-colonialism still exists, it goes on in France, because, as you know, their values and ideas and are so basically fundamentally different. Muslim cultures are really so vastly different and, in my opinion, almost incompatible with the liberté, the égalité kind of a concept of France.
Meaning you are dealing with these students with traumatic experiences, with injured egos. Some of them have what you might call ressentiment against American culture. How do you deal with these people having misgivings, resentments against American culture?
Ressentiment.
Yes. Why? How do you deal with them?
Well, that's exactly why I became intrigued and interested in their existence and their conflict in terms of cultural identity and the traumatism they have suffered.
That's why the CUNY management picked you out for the job.
Well, not necessarily, because they really needed professors of anthropology too, you see, in general, yes. So it is an extremely interesting contrast between France and those former French colonies. And I have come to realize that the cultural, but particularly religious difference are really enormous. I don't mean religion per se, Catholicism versus Islam, not that simplistically. But as you know, religion is not just religion of worshipping their gods.
Does the religion matter so much? Because some people say the Black Lives Matter, white lives matter, but the Black lives. And then what about the religion?
But first of all, we cannot mix them up, because racism is quite another matter, extremely important and extremely particularly and uniquely significant, especially in the United States, where slavery occurred. Well, in France too, of course, in Caribbean islands, Caribbeans, etc. But especially as a legal human trade for such a long time, and it is such a huge blemish.
But those people try harder because they're hungrier. What about the Japanese? They're far richer. Does that mean the Japanese will make a better grades in your university? If you want, you get a lot of students from Asia. How Japanese students fare?
Well, I don't think we can really compare the African Americans and the Japanese people in Japan, not Japanese Americans I'm talking about.
But some people are not afraid to speak out. But a lot of Japanese are kind of shy. You might give it a kind of Indio syndrome. They shy away from making comments. Doesn't that bother you?
Bother me?
Yeah.
Of course, I'm terribly frustrated when inwardly very wise and knowledgeable Japanese student would not speak up. I know this person has some brilliant ideas. This is a person of wisdom, maybe. And what she writes in her opinion essays, for example, are really very, very persuasive and brilliant. But when it comes to speaking about it, when I ask her to summarize it to class, suddenly she clumps up. she is too afraid to make a mistake or too embarrassed, not to do very well. I think I have come to the conclusion that it's really the language barrier is not the only one. It's cultural barrier there, because the Japanese culture is kind of a self-effacing culture.
Yeah.
Whereas the English and American or Western culture in general is that of a self-promoting kind of a culture, and they speak up. Expressing oneself by words is absolutely necessary and important, and they start training to speak publicly or to make a presentation, even when they were in an elementary school. You see, they are trained. They express their opinions and ideas verbally. That's the name of the game there, since they are really young children. Whereas here, don't talk too much.
Don't talk much.
Yeah, don't ask questions, because it's more like challenging the authority or confronting.
About the Japanese,
yes.
Or some other Asian students try not to speak out, but you said, I know they are smarter than they look. You didn't say that, but I'm under the impression is I know that. What do you mean? Without experiencing their hearts and minds, how do you know? They don't talk, but they're smarter than they look.
No, because I have been teaching how to write college essays as well.
Writing essays.
Writing, as you know very well, by looking at one sentence that someone has written, you know immediately the level of English.
Now I know. You know.
Yes.
That they're.
You know, I know now.
They deserve better. But they, to borrow your word, self-effacing culture. Where does that come from?
It's a combination of things. But first of all, the sense of pride.
Sense of pride, kimono
and the
mentality.
Shame. Yes. I think that's really huge.
Shame culture. It's hard to combat the sense of shame.
So the Japanese students, the Japanese people in general, trying to learn English, for example, should really get rid of their foolish pride and just speak up. It's a foreign language. Of course, people will make I'd say we one-sidedly try to acquire English, whereas English native speakers just don't do anything. Americans are notorious for not knowing foreign languages. So we are carrying the whole burden for them too. So there's no reason to be embarrassed or to be ashamed if the Japanese people's English is not so good. I mean, we speak good Japanese in general, right?
Next week, perhaps we're going to pick up where we are leaving off.
Yes.
What about, you have any pieces of advice for the Japanese coming to your university at CUNY? What advice would you give to those who are wishing to be a woman like you?
Woman like me.
Don't be shy. That would a little bit too cliche.
Well, just be yourself. Be spontaneous. It's so simple.
How can I be spontaneous? Because none of them speaks the way you do. You're perfect, but
no, I'm not perfect.
Come on,
But I must tell you, this is a wonderful opportunity to be able to say this. You know what? I have been a vagabond. I have been going around the world.
Nomad.
Unafraid.
Mongolian nomad. Steps.
I was armed with English. That's very, very big. In retrospect, you see, as I look back, how I was so unafraid to go around the world, solo, all by myself. And you see, I was doing. Really, I realized that I was doing that international, worldwide anthropological research by going around there, and armed with English, and later on with French. And as I think most of you do know, if you have acquired one foreign language very well, in this case English, a second foreign language or the third will come easy on you.
Really? You mean the two languages are two
Absolutely.
cultures, three languages are three cultures? Do you abide by that principle?
Paris is my third home. So when I land in France, Charles de Gaulle airport, suddenly I'm French. My mouth, French comes out of my mouth. And
Yeah, you're both mouth first.
no,
Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
I protest that because that
Maybe I
means
shouldn't have said
I
that.
don't like the expression 英語ペラペラ喋る ペラペラ so superficial and without content. You see, I always emphasize the importance of communicating. Why do you learn English? English is language, and that is a tool, right? And you have to think of what to do with English, right? Not just learn English itself. It's a tool. So.
How did you cope with that, the barrier, psychological barrier, looking back where you come from?
I come from a very, very deprived and impoverished and disadvantaged environment, home and everything. You know what? But when you start with nothing, you get the strength and freedom because you have nothing to lose.
God, next week we're going to pick up where you left off. How to start from nothing. So stay with us. Michihiro Matsumoto, known as Channel Tokyo, Japan, with Tomomi Moriwake, CUNY professor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Come back again.
Thank you.